One romantic and haunting Hollywood love story stands out among the many. It involves a couple who were together for almost 20 years yet never parted ways. Diane Keaton and Al Pacino, two movie icons inseparable from The Godfather, narrate their love story despite the fact that they were never physically present. Diane Keaton, an autonomous, clever, and courageous inspiration, proposed to Al Pacino because she loved him so much. Pacino, the man with the ethereal eyes and the unpredictable heart, chose to ignore her and depart silently. They used to be roommates. They wept silently for one another once they exchanged vows. However, in the end, they all went in separate directions. There was no marriage, no finality, just an odd friendship that has lasted. Join us in discovering the story behind the spotlight by leaving a comment below if you've ever admired Diane Keaton, a symbol of brilliance and independence, or been intrigued by Al Pacino's uncompromising look. An affection that remained unspoken. An ending that was never really finalized. In what ways did Diane Keaton's pain manifest? The man who once claimed, "I love you forever," couldn't hang on to her. What happened to make him fail? Diane Keaton and Al Pacino's unfinished story begins long before they ever met, and that's why it's important to know this. To the formative years of infancy and artistic pursuits that subtly molded their capacities for love and release. A staunch Catholic from Los Angeles, Diane Keaton was born into the Keaton family. Her dad worked as a civil engineer, and her mom, Dorothy, won a beauty competition in their town but gave up acting for the sake of raising their daughter. Diane vowed she would never lead a life like that when she was a little girl because she saw a beautiful woman confined to a kitchen. Many guys were scared of Diane because she was an independent lady who wanted to be distinct from the others. She was also quite outspoken and confident from a young age. Diane was susceptible because of the wounded shadow her mother cast. A complete love was what she sought. A love that isn't fleeting but rather courageous enough to remain. A house. A business associate. An assurance within the realm of creative uncertainty. In Al Pacino's eyes, she saw precisely that, or so she believed. The tale that Al Pacino told was very different. A low-income Italian-American family welcomed him into the world in East Harlem, New York. At the tender age of 2, his parents filed for a divorce. Rose, his mother, brought him up on her own as she worked 2 jobs in a small apartment in the Bronx. Al Pacino's family was never an example for him. On the contrary, he initially felt at home in the bustle of city streets, in abandoned theaters and movie houses, and in smaller venues. Even though his passion for performing began at a young age, he was only ever ready to devote himself fully to it. In his pursuit of acting, Pacino endured expulsion from school, worked as a cinema usher, delivered newspapers, and even slept in parks. Just getting by in that world hardened him. He possessed a kind demeanor, yet he remained aloof and unapproachable. Above everything else, he was terrified of getting attached. Because, in Pacino's view, being attached meant giving up one's independence. Furthermore, he believed that independence was his sole means of survival. 2 people, one of whom wants to cling desperately and the other who knows how to flee. They are both in love, but they are also both alone and unable to love each other safely. It wasn't simply a case of 2 teenage actors landing roles in a masterpiece when they crossed paths in 1971 on the set of The Godfather. There were 2 spirits. Surprisingly recognizing each other at first glimpse, much removed from the concept of redemption. But sometimes, just when people think they have hope, fate takes it away. He mentioned that they were about to fire Pacino, and I distinctly recall him saying that. As a result of his insecurity, people continued to despise him. Diane Keaton and Al Pacino initially crossed paths in 1971 while filming The Godfather. They were both relatively unknown at the time. Although Pacino was a newcomer to the big screen, Keaton was a successful independent comedian. But in the tense setting of a classic mob picture, something subtly started to happen when their gazes met. An unspoken bond, powerful and delicate, as if destiny had begun penning a different story for them outside the scope of the camera. Diane Keaton has stated in various interviews that she was instantly smitten with Pacino. "He was the center of my universe," she declared. "He had charisma and wit. On top of being strangely gorgeous, he talked incessantly. Like a lost child or a crazy genius, he had an air about him. And I was captivated." In contrast, Pacino remained silent. While he was seeing Keaton, he never came out and said anything about it. However, it is palpable for anyone who takes in the making of videos or hears first-hand accounts from pals. Their connection went beyond simple chemistry or professional harmony, rather, it was like a gravitational pull that neither could quite put their finger on. They started dating in secret and their love blossomed subtly as they watched Part 2 and Part 3 of The Godfather. They seemed unable to let go of each other as they loved, broke up, and then reconnected throughout the 1970s. Diane Keaton started to grasp it all around that period. Pacino wasn't merely the object of her adolescent crush. She was patient enough to wait nearly 20 years for a response because of her mild infatuation. Yet, the response never materialized. Even worse, Pacino was aware of how harsh it was. Still profound, captivating, emotionally detached, and uncommitted, he remained unaltered. More than anything else, that made it seem like Diane was the one who was continually being pursued. Diane Keaton and Al Pacino's affair was unlike any other in Hollywood. It failed to make a splash in the media. Official engagement announcements and adoring red carpet images were conspicuously absent. Silently and haphazardly, it continued for nearly 20 years, like an unfinished tune that played, faded, and then began again. After working together on The Godfather for the first time, they started dating secretly. Keaton dated other people when they weren't together. She was in a relationship with Mel Gibson, Warren Beatty, and Woody Allen. However, Pacino's name would always remain ingrained in her memory. The Godfathers were all about one thing, Al, she once stated. That was her whole point. The evasion of commitment by Al Pacino persisted, nonetheless. His connections, particularly Diane's, were perpetually shattered. They thought each breakup would be the last, yet they ended up getting back together multiple times. The industry often remarked that Keaton was the only one who could be both tender and wise enough to calm Pacino when he was anxious, and who could be both loving and patient enough to wait for something that she knew would never come. In the late 80s, while filming Part 3 of The Godfather in Rome, things started to change. Everyone at the villa thought Pacino would finally propose to Keaton after all these years, and they stayed there together. Unfortunately, things turned out differently. Diane threatened him with the end of their relationship unless he got married. It was not her that Al Pacino picked. A dramatic fight was not the way the story ended. But in the face of an eerie quiet, Pacino silently withdrew, never looking back, as Diane sank into sadness and sat in treatment after learning her father had a brain tumor. She kept asking him questions when questioned about that moment. I desired more. His affection for me should have been reciprocated, I wished. Indeed, that was the tragic event. When you love someone too much, they may eventually leave you. As far as music is concerned, Diane Keaton and Al Pacino's love would sound like a solo, with one actor playing the part indefinitely while the other gracefully exits the stage. Because throughout the most intimate moments of this relationship, Keaton was the one that took the lead in moving forward, hoping, and being prepared. Even though Pacino was grateful and moved, he stayed still as he saw love elude him. Diane used to say that Pacino was a brilliant lost soul, someone who was smart, charismatic, contradictory, and who never allowed anyone to get too near. In her words, he had the most stunning features she had ever seen, was a complete moron, and was absolutely stunning. However, their words fell short in their attempts to bind a heart that was never truly prepared. Pacino never tied the knot. He didn't believe in a happy ending that could keep him from leaving, not because he didn't love. Diane later acknowledged in an interview that she wasn't the perfect life mate since she lacked the nurturing instinct and wasn't solid enough. What she failed to realize, though, was that the most profound wounds were caused by her too loving. Pacino, too? No one ever wed him. He never tied the knot, despite having 4 kids from 3 separate marriages. According to his friends, Pacino was troubled by the idea that marriage would destroy something lovely and drew him closer to the prospect of giving up his independence. Even more so, maybe he was aware that he lacked the capacity for normal, committed love. Throughout their 20-year romance, Diane Keaton was unable to keep the man she loved. Despite his best efforts, Pacino was never able to establish a permanent connection with a woman. Despite their differences, they were both defeated. When a love affair ended in rejection, the survivor took everything with her. Women in Diane's characters were strong, humorous, and free-spirited, but they also had a secret loneliness that she conveyed via her wounds. Even in his 80s, Al Pacino remains an outsider, bringing that loneliness to massive platforms. Without a third party, scandal, or divorce papers, the love story between Diane Keaton and Al Pacino concluded with one partner withdrawing from commitment and the other finally deciding to let go. But the true question persisted when the lights went down and the ovation died down. After everything happened, who lived life to the fullest? Diane Keaton never dated publicly again after her final breakup with Pacino. She adopted a girl and a boy after she was far into her 50s, and she remained alone for more than 35 years. She came clean in an interview about how no one had ever asked her to marry them. They may have come to the realization that I am not the most amiable person. Surprisingly, it was she who strongly expressed her regret about not getting married. Diane Keaton became one of the most accomplished women in Hollywood, a Golden Globe winner, an Oscar winner, and an honoree of the American Film Institute, AFI, even though she never had a romantic partner. Her striking good looks, brilliant mind, and distinctive personality made her an icon. She may have been wounded by love before, but she never let it dampen her sense of humor or her confidence. What about Keaton's ex-proposal, Al Pacino? Neither did he ever tie the knot. His 3 mistresses have given him 4 offspring. The only one of them relationships that lasted more than a few years was the one with Beverly D'Angelo. It resulted in the birth of twins, Anton and Olivia. Each subsequent one, from Lucilla Pollack to Martha Keller and, most recently, Noor Al-Fallah, the mother of his youngest son, who was born in 2023, seemed to slip away like a string of incomplete movie scenes. "I avoid doors that might lead to pain," Pacino whispered when asked why he never got married. A hauntingly simple sentence. Maybe he deliberately kept everyone and everything at arm's length because he knew he couldn't make anyone happy. On his own, Keaton decided. Pasolini opted for detachment. A therapist's office was the only place only one person ever sobbed for a love that never materialized. "I Love You Forever" was the only one who dared to stand in front of thousands of onlookers and an entire industry's acclaim. If anyone came out on top, it would be the one who kept their composure. However, it was the one who loved more deeply who was more harmed. A relationship that goes from love to heartbreak and then subtly evolves into something rooted on profound respect and lasting connection is unusual in the chaotic, transient world of showbiz. However, Al Pacino and Diane Keaton accomplished precisely that. In addition to no longer being romantically involved, they were also no longer friends. Despite the fact that no one else could have ever understood the events that transpired between them, their friendship persisted unwaveringly, as if nothing had ever really separated them. Al Pacino took the stage in 2017 to celebrate Diane Keaton at the American Film Institute's Lifetime Achievement Awards presentation. Even though it had been almost 30 years since they had loved one another, that night, Pacino's gaze made it seem like nothing had happened. Prior to interviews, he reminisced about Rome and provided behind-the-scenes bits that only he and Keaton had. He also spoke about the times Keaton made him chuckle. He seemed to hesitate for breath as he finished his statement, and then he exclaimed, "I love you forever," to the whole crowd. Perhaps because she had shed enough tears before, Diane Keaton could only grin instead of crying. There is little coverage of their friendship in the media. There is a lack of documentation of joint dinners or strolls down the red carpet. Nonetheless, they continue to use the most loving language while discussing one another in interviews. According to what Keaton previously said, Pacino has the most stunning face she's ever seen. Continually startling and vibrant, Keaton was characterized by Pacino as a woman unlike any other. When love can't keep someone around, maybe friendship is the only thing that can keep you from losing each other entirely. And that's the one they went with. Stay away from each other, don't go back, and don't try to ignore or gloss over what happened. Although they separated physically, they remained in each other's hearts forever. Lovers broke up. Despite this, Diane Keaton and Al Pacino were never really farewelled. Diane Keaton and Al Pacino's romance is more than just a romance gone wrong, it's a microcosm of a larger, generational tragedy, the futile attempt of 2 extraordinary, self-reliant, and ambitious people to love one another in a world where such qualities are unacceptable. Inner lives and early emotional scars motivate both Keaton and Pacino as artists. Born into a family where ambition ran rampant, Keaton's mother, an artist who never felt she had a chance to shine, instilled in her daughter a relentless drive to establish her own unique personality via her work. Despite her desire for profound love, she drew the line at mediocrity and the prospect of control. In contrast, Pacino had an unconventional upbringing, growing up without a father figure while living in the Bronx's poverty and stumbling around New York City in search of acting gigs. He saw love as an eternal danger to his independence, an excessive price to pay for a steadiness he didn't understand. While Pacino yearned for independence, Keaton yearned for a home in this relationship. "I loved Pacino not for who he was, but for what he represented, a lost soul that needed saving," Keaton confessed once. Though he loved Diane, Pacino never indicated a willingness to change or considered giving up anything of himself for love. Art brought them together, but art itself, their fixation on roles, careers, and creative freedom, was what drove a wedge between them. They all decided to keep on in their respective directions. Diane, who never felt she needed a man to complete her, became an icon of strong, self-reliant women. Perhaps it was destined for them all along that a great love does not necessarily go hand in hand with a great career, that some people are born to love each other profoundly but never meant to live together, because Pacino became increasingly reclusive and independent to the point of solitude, befitting a man who belongs solely to the screen.
Two Hollywood legends, Diane Keaton and Al Pacino, had an unconventional love affair.
Through being truthful, through years of waiting, through lonely isolation, and through difficult decisions. Still, they accomplished nothing. Despite the presence of photographers, there was no joyous finale or wedding. Instead, the words "I love you forever" lingered in the air. Is it a real love, or was Pacino merely standing on the outside looking in when Diane Keaton entered it? Is it love or a mistake if the person you love enough to propose to walks away silently? How genuine was it, and how much regret was there, if that person still talks about you with teary eyes after more than 20 years? In the end, they broke up. However, they remain inseparable. Even though she's been unmarried for over half her life, Diane Keaton has never been compelled to speak as much in interviews by anyone, and Al Pacino will never let anyone replace Diane Keaton in his heart. There are loves that don't require titles, and there are ends that don't require marriages, but there are also hurts that don't have names because they were never completely over. Now, what are your thoughts on the matter? The question is whether Diane Keaton fell in love with the wrong man or the right one at the wrong moment. Could you endure one more twist and turn if you were the protagonist in that story? Maybe love doesn't stop when a person goes. Share your ideas in the space provided. It starts when we muster the strength to keep moving forward, even while our hearts are exposed. If you want to make sure you don't miss the next heartbreaking story, subscribe to our channel.